Hello, so welcome to another reading vlog. This vlog, somehow, I've actually already started a bunch of books and I do feel like there's a bit of a theme. I don't really know how I started all these books already over the weekend. I should have been doing other things, that's what happened. I should have been doing other things and instead I started some different books and I started lots of different ones because I didn't want to get too far into any of them before I talked to you, but I was sick and so I didn't feel like talking to you. Anyway, the theme of these books, I'm thinking of it as dark shit for all generations. So most of these books kind of have dark elements, but some of them are for younger age groups and some of them are for older ones. So I thought, since I'm reading these all at the same time, it'd be kind of interesting to compare the different generations a little bit. So maybe let's start with the oldest age group and then work down where I don't have any books yet, but I might sort something out since we've got a theme going. And this is actually one I haven't started yet, but this is After Dark by Haruki Murakami. I picked this up from a second-hand shop the other week for $1, mainly just because it's Haruki Murakami. I've read Kafka on the Shore and The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Murakami before. I really liked The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. I didn't like Kafka on the Shore so much, but definitely he has some dark shit in his books. Some of it I really like, and some of it, like especially the weird sex stuff, I'm not that keen on. This one I expect is going to have dreams in it, which I'm excited about, and also more sex stuff, which I'm not excited about. I'm hoping it's short enough that we won't get too much weird sex stuff in it. But other than that, I don't really know much about this, and I think we're just going to wait till we start it to find out anything else. So this was published in 2007, but Haruki Murakami is a boomer, so we're going to put this in the boomer generation dark shit section. Then the next oldest one I've got is Confessions by Kanae Minato. Kanae Minato. My Japanese, sadly lacking. Interestingly though, that both of these dark shit ones are Japanese. I do find the Japanese are quite good at dark shit. This one I need to pick up from the library tomorrow. I don't know much about it except I think some situation where this teacher's daughter gets killed and then the teacher quits, but on her last day she pulls the class together and says, I know what you did, or something along the lines. This one I haven't started yet, but I'll pick it up tomorrow and then maybe we will have a go at it. And this one, even though it was only published in 2014, the author is Gen X, so I'm going to count it for Gen X. I personally am on the cusp kind of between Gen X and Millennial. I associate with different ones depending on how I feel. So I do think of all the books that I'm reading, Confessions is one that I'm going to particularly like, but we'll see. Then, ones that I've actually started. I also started listening to the audiobook of The Atlas Six by Olivie Blake. So Olivie Blake is a millennial, so we're counting this for the millennials. This book has been really popular. I think she originally published it independently, but then it was picked up by a publisher and improved a bit. I'm pretty sure my audiobook is the improved version. So basically it turns out that the Library of Alexandria wasn't really burned down. It just went into secret underground mode. And there's a secret society that these 6 magicians are being given the chance to join, but only 5 of them will continue on to the second year of this internship. And so it's kind of a little bit like Survivor in that they're meant to be working together in some ways, but also they know that at the end they get to choose who's not going to continue. And each one kind of has quite different powers as well as different motivations for why they would like to be there. So far I think I'm like 20-25% of the way through, and it's mainly just been introducing the different characters. I feel like I have the biggest connection to Libby and Nico, and like we got the most backstory for those 2 characters. But Tristan is also very interesting. Mainly I'm just saying these names for anyone who's actually read the Atlas Six, because I don't want to give too much information because I'm not sure yet what is actually spoilers. But also, so far it doesn't seem too dark. I've heard it described by a lot of people as dark academia, and I was hoping that it actually would be quite dark. But I guess we'll see whether it actually delivers on what I'm hoping for. But maybe it's the kind of dark that millennials think is dark, but not quite dark enough for me because I'm that little bit Gen X. Who knows, but I will continue that and we'll see. Then I also have another one. So I've got In Every Generation by Kendare Blake. This I'm counting for kind of older Gen Z, even though it's also kind of a Gen X concept rehashed for Gen Z. So this is set in the world of Buffy. I am about 70 pages in, and I have to say I'm already a little bit frustrated about it though, because it feels like it's actually just trying to recreate the same situation from the original Buffy series so that it can tell that story again. But I personally feel like it kind of shits on everything that happened in season 7 of Buffy, the last season of that TV show. But as well, like after that TV season, they continued on in comic form. I've got the comics somewhere, I'll find them. I don't have all of them. They actually continued on for quite a long time. And just reading the synopsis of this, so we've got the daughter of Willow, who has just become a slayer, which wasn't what she expected because she'd always expected to become a witch. And so now she's just kind of started accepting the fact that she's going to be the new slayer. But everything that's happening doesn't make any sense. Something happened. For her to become a slayer, someone only becomes a slayer when someone else dies. And it doesn't make sense that they're mucking around in Sunnydale doing stupid shit when, like, something has happened to their friends and family. Why aren't they off trying to find out about what's happened there? Why are they doing this nonsense? And I feel like the characters are falling a little bit flat for me. And there's been a couple of times where it has tried to do the Buffy style humor, and that hasn't hit for me either. And one thing I will say, there was also a duology written by Kirsten White in the Slayer world, and that was set kind of following a lot of the comics. And to me, it fit a lot better with the world, and the humor was very well done, I thought. There's definitely some problems with that duology, but the humor was very good. This is just, I don't know, the writing for me is just a bit too simple so far, and it hasn't really gotten very dark. The first chapter, I thought it might do it, but then it pulled itself back and went just kind of into teen drama, which not really my thing. But maybe it would be better for a different generation. Anyway, I will continue this, and we're going to count it for that Gen Z generation. I also would like to have some younger books though, so I am listening to the audiobooks for Skulduggery Pleasant. I'm currently listening to number 5, Mortal Coil, but I also have number 6, Deathbringer, and I kind of just want to get to the end of that series, to be honest. And I've heard the end of the first section is at the end of book 9. I really don't think I'm going to get to the end of book 9 this week, but we'll see how far I can get through that series. So this is one where it's kind of split generations again. It's kind of targeted at the age group, which is currently Gen Z, but I believe a lot of millennials read this when they were younger and they really love this. So a lot of millennials are now doing a reread of it. Because I think actually though, the 15th final book only just came out. Anyway, this is a book series about this girl, Stephanie, whose uncle dies and she inherits her uncle's house, and as a result learns about the magical world and her own magical powers, and she kind of teams up with this guy, Skulduggery Pleasant, and becomes like a magical detective. He's a skeleton. So this one, I love the sense of humor, but I found as the books go on, it feels just like the plot is very muddy, and even though things are happening, they never seem very interesting. And it could be, as I've said, that I can never keep track of all the different bad guys. Or it could just be that maybe I'm the wrong generation for it. I don't know. But it is kind of dark, and there is an element in the one that I'm reading about prophecy, and the results of the prophecy are potentially quite dark, so I'm hoping it'll get a little bit dark. And since I have to go to the library tomorrow, I'm going to also try and see if I can find some kind of children's picture book that's quite dark, and maybe I could even find like a middle grade type book that's actually targeted properly at Gen Z rather than being a millennial one that just still seems to be hanging around in Gen Z times. I don't know. I think I'm just making some excuses to read some dark books, even though I'm a little bit worried that none of them are going to be dark enough for me. So I just feel like reading some dark shit. But Confessions, actually. Confessions is the one which I am hopeful for. So I guess we'll see how it goes. I'm not sure what else is really going on this week. I've kind of been sick last week, and so I'm still recovering from that. I do have my regular infusion that I go to the hospital for on Wednesday. But other than that, no plans yet, but maybe we'll make some along the way. Hello, so my skin, as usual, is unhappy, but hopefully I've like overexposed this so you can't even tell. But somehow I've ended up with a massive book haul here, so I thought I would show you mostly library books, but a couple of other ones. So I just went to the warehouse, just like a department store, and I got this bargain version of Into the Drowning Deep, which I really liked. This is a horror mermaid story, actually, so it almost could have fit into this vlog, but we're not going to read it. But it is a good one if you like scary mermaids. Oh, the only other book that I purchased was The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. So I went randomly to this other supermarket because I've been trying to track down this particular thing, but I didn't realize that the charity shop right next to that has like its own little room for books, which was pretty cool. Not actually that much selection though, but I thought I would get The Bone Season. I don't really remember much about it. Something to do with psychics, maybe. But you know, like I thought The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon was okay. Possibly not completely living up to the hype, but still I liked it. And this is a series that's also very hyped, so I thought I'd pick up the first book since it was cheap. Then, library books. So ones that don't fit very well into this vlog. Firstly, I've got the last 2 books from the Babysitters Club. It's very shiny. Babysitters Club graphic novel adaptations. I've been reading these. Once I've read these, I'll be caught up, so I'll be making good progress on Series 0. But these definitely don't fit into this vlog of reading dark things. This one possibly would fit, but I'm going to save it for other reasons because I'll never get to this week. But this is Fevered Star, which is the sequel to Black Sun. The beginning of Black Sun, the mother blinded her son, so that's pretty dark. I actually got myself the audiobook to re-listen to it before I read this because I feel like I've forgotten some of the details. But I am excited to continue this series, even though, to be honest, I haven't heard the best things about it. I've heard it's kind of meh, but still I want to continue the series and catch up. I'm making that Series 0 progress. And I also picked up the one for this vlog, Confessions. This isn't really the cover I was expecting, but this is the cover we've got. It's not very long, so hopefully that means I should be able to get through it. So that's a good sign. As well, what else? Then I went into the children's section of the library, which I normally don't go into. It's kind of when you go into the library, you have a choice of going into the main library or the children's section. And I always just go into the main library. I went into the children's section and there were a lot of very tempting books. So that is a dangerous place to go. Even just the picture books, so many of them looked cool. But I controlled myself and I only picked up one children's book. I picked up this one, When I See Red, and it just seems to be like about being really angry. I didn't read it in the library, although I could have because there's only a few words, but like it just looks like there is lovely art in here too. There's a girl around, but it just looks lovely. I guess it's a story, you know, like teaching children how to deal with their anger, but I thought that looked interesting and kind of dark. Like strong emotions count as being dark, right? And talking about anger with children is possibly as dark as we get for very young children. I also picked up a couple of like spooky looking stories. I don't know if either of these would be any good, but honestly, I started looking in the chapter book type section and there were so many different options, but also I can't judge what's meant to be dark from the covers. Like spooky books are the easiest to identify, so that's what I got. I don't know anything about them. I got Half Past Peculiar, Finders Creepers. Oh, I got this one because it said the art is done by Dustin Nguyen, who does the art for the Descender series, which I really love. So I just kind of decided I'd put it into this for that reason. It seems to be some children that start like a pet finding business. I don't know, but it looks spooky, right? So we're going to read that. And it should be quick. And then as well, I got this Watch Hollow. It kind of looked spooky. It kind of seemed like maybe there might be some weird time stuff in it. I think that's what attracted me to this. Also, I was just getting overwhelmed. Something about like magical clock animals. Oh yeah, and it has like these spooky clock pictures in it. So we're going to go with these as our like dark books for children. I don't know, actually. Is this still Gen Z? Probably, right? Anyway. I don't know if I'll let myself go back into the children's section of the library because there are way too many good books there and it's way too dangerous. But I got myself a couple to read anyway. And I think I should be able to get to them this week. But we'll see because it's already Tuesday, halfway through. And I haven't really read that much. Actually, I did make a bunch of progress while I was shopping today. I was listening to Mortal Coil mostly. So I'm past halfway. To be honest, I'm not as invested as I want to be. And I feel like while I was shopping, some of it just kind of like flew past me and I felt like I didn't care that much. I do think like there's some really dark stuff that's happening here. And this one, like there's a surgery of someone who's, I guess, technically dead, but not dead. And their heart's cut out. Like, that's pretty gross. And there's like people being murdered, but it's just written like none of this stuff matters in a way, which is really weird to think about. But I might try and finish that off this afternoon while I do some housework. And then as well, I read like another 70 pages of In Every Generation, and I still don't feel like anything that's happening makes sense. And I'm really disappointed in what they've done with Willow's character and Spike's character. And even Oz is not very Oz, although I can see some parts where clearly she's trying to make it Oz. So those are the main characters that are in it from the main series. There's also mentions of Xander and Dawn and Buffy and some of the other Slayers. But the actual plot of what's happening is very, like, nothing-ish. I guess there was one part where a vampire ate someone's heart, but there's not really enough, like, darkness for me. The main character doesn't really have any problems. Like, I know the original kind of concept of Buffy was that these vampires were like representing like the darkness and the issues that teens have to deal with. But it's like our main character doesn't really have that many problems. And she does have a friend who I actually would have preferred the story from her perspective, but she's been pulled into this boring story, and so she's kind of being boring too. And I just think the writing is very simplistic, which maybe is right for the target market, but I'm not hating it, but I'm not necessarily enjoying it either. Anyway, today is quickly disappearing on me because I slept in, so I better go and do some other stuff, but I will catch up with you guys again later. Hello, so I kind of feel somewhat human today, which is the first time after being sick for like a weekish, so thank goodness. Although I was going to go to my infusion today, but they ended up having scheduling problems, and they asked me if it would be okay if I moved till Monday, but also if instead of going to Teckentrup Hospital, which is over on the other side of town, like a 25-minute drive, instead of going to that one, I can go to the North Shore Hospital, which is really close to me, like 5-minute drive, but I'll probably walk even. So I'm excited about the change in location, even though I have mixed feelings about the delay. But since I'm feeling human, I think I can wait. Anyway, since I didn't have to do that today, I decided to film a couple of videos. And while I'm here, I may as well update you. Last night, I read a bit more of this. How much? Probably another 70 pages. 30... Honestly, about another 70 pages. 70 pages at a time must be what I'm doing with this book. This one, like, I was kind of feeling the same, just kind of frustrated with what's happening. But then there is one bad character in here who potentially could be the angel equivalent for Frankie. So like a vampire with a soul, perhaps, to be some kind of love interest. Not a vampire with a soul, slightly different. But I suspect, maybe, I might be wrong. But that is the part of Buffy that I would be interested in seeing brought forward into this book. So I'm at least a little bit interested about what's happening. I'm still frustrated that there's like this big thing over here and they're just ignoring it most of the time. And then some other nonsense things happening. But there are a few different mysteries going on, so that's at least interesting. I'm not sure if I'm loving it yet, but I guess I'm disliking it less. So I'll read some more of that tonight. I wanted to try and finish it today, but I don't know if I'll get to it. Also, I managed to finish off while I was doing bits and pieces this morning, mostly while I was procrastinating this morning. I managed to finish off Mortal Coil. For the most part, I still kind of felt very meh about it. However, there was one part where one character asked another one for help, and right at that moment I realized that the character they were asking for help could potentially at some point be the bad guy that we're worried about currently with this whole prophecy. And that didn't come to be within this book that I'm reading, but I am very interested to see whether it will happen or whether I'm like completely off base. But I don't know, I just feel like it's weird because in a lot of ways this is really dark. Like there's murder, and in this one there's possession, and there's like really awful situations. And I did feel like the characters were reacting to it, but for the most part they're not as upset as I think you actually would be if these dark things actually did happen. So it's almost like because the characters aren't reacting to what's happening, it makes all these awful things that are happening seem less important. And because the characters themselves are not really that dark, it's more the things that are happening in the situation that's dark. So because the characters are ignoring it, it kind of makes it seem less dark. And I guess that's generally the approach when you use dark things in more children's books, like books targeted at the younger audience. It's like, it's dark, but it's also still kind of fun. And so that's maybe my problem with reading darker books for a younger generation, because I want dark, but like it's awful. But still, I am kind of hoping that by reading these darker books for younger children or younger people, when I do read the ones that are targeted at my age group, that I'll enjoy them even more, like relatively. Like, is that a good approach to reading? To purposely read books that you don't think you're going to like just before books that you're hoping to like, so that relatively the books you want to like are like elevated in your head? I'm not sure it's time efficient, but maybe it works. Anyway, the other thing that I did read some more of this morning was the Atlas 6, and I don't know how I'm feeling about it. I'm conflicted. In some ways, I really love it, but I feel like the most interesting things are these characters' backstories, but we're not actually getting that much about their relationships from outside of this library of Alexandria. And the stuff that's happening within the library, like they're doing this magical research, and it's not really clear what they're doing there. There is definitely an element of like they're trying to do like travel across distances and maybe even time travel, and that is interesting, but it's not really described in any kind of detail, so it's kind of unclear what they're really doing. Definitely the story is focused on like the relationships between the characters, and that's probably the thing that I'm the least interested in. As well, like there's a couple of characters, one who probably is a murderer, probably kind of a dick, probably into really dark things, but like I don't think we've gotten hardly any of his perspective. There's also this girl who has telepathy, and she's kind of using it for weird purposes, and I'm like, what is your actual goal here? Because she seems like she's very morally grey and does all sorts of terrible things. But then she found out something about the other guy when he did a bad thing and killed someone. And then she's all upset about it. And I'm like, yeah, but aren't you morally grey? Wouldn't you kill someone in the same way? It's kind of weird. But I guess she's worried more about him doing a similar thing like he did to her. So maybe she's more upset about herself, which maybe makes more sense. But I don't know, there's something about the way it's written. It kind of reminds me of The Diviners, which is another one where I felt like the story was really focused on the relationships, and I really wanted more of the magic in the world. And it's the same thing so far with the Atlas 6, is it's really focused on the characters and the relationships, and I want more of the magic in the world. Although there are some relationships that I'm interested in, but the progress with what's happening there is very slow. Why are you not focusing on me? Are you focusing on me? Is that my eyes? I don't know. But I am now going to go, I think, to the mall and buy some hair dye. I've been kind of putting off doing something with my roots because I wanted to try and bleach this bit again to make it lighter. But also, I wanted to give it a good break since the last bleaching before I bleached it again. But yesterday, when I was not feeling very human, I thought, God, I've got to really deal with these roots. And so I thought I would dye my hair tomorrow. But now that I'm feeling more human, I'm like, maybe I could wait a few more weeks. But I might go and buy the dye, so I at least have the option to do it when I decide to do it. Also, it's kind of sunny today, so it'd be nice to go out for a walk, because having felt sickish, I haven't been out much lately, and I think I need some fresh air and some exercise. So I'm going to go and do that, and while I'm doing that, I will listen to more of the Atlas 6, and hopefully it will keep drawing me in rather than pushing me more towards the side of thinking that I don't care. But we'll see. Hello. So I haven't done much today except dye my hair, although I'm pretty happy with it. To be honest, I went to the shop to buy some hair dye and they had hardly any selection, or they had selection but lots of colours that weren't the colours I wanted. So I picked some that I thought might add up to the colour I wanted, and this is pretty close actually, so I'm quite impressed I managed to do that. And it's just nice to have nice coloured hair again and not crazy roots, although of course they'll come back. But anyway, I wanted to update you on my reading. I did manage to do a little bit today. So firstly, I finished off In Every Generation, and I don't know what it was. maybe it was because the adults were around less, so there was less of that trying to have these adult characters act like their younger selves. I don't know what it was. Anyway, less of that and more just of these new young kids fighting some vampires. I think I just kind of decided to let go that it doesn't make sense. Like, it didn't make sense that the adults win in the story, because, like, if your mother is a badass witch and you're fighting this crazy vampire who can't die, and you readily accept that your training is not going well and that you're not a very good slayer because you're brand new to it, would you really decide to go the night after she totally kicks your ass? Would you go to fight her yourself without taking your mum? I would take my mum, to be honest. Anyway, I think if you can let go of all the things that don't make sense about this story, then it is a lot of fun. Or at least the second half I found to be a lot more fun. The only thing is that there's kind of something that happens to all the slayers at the beginning of this book. And by the end of the book, you don't find out what's happened. Or, like, there's still a lot of open questions. And I think it's going to be a trilogy, which I'm not super excited about, but also, like, I did have fun in the second half, so maybe I would enjoy more books in this series. I guess we will see how I feel about it later. I did think as well, this did get darker at the same time as getting more fun. There's a lot more death, and I think as well because it kind of mixes comedy with dark things happening, which actually interesting. This, I felt like almost the comedy about the dark things, like the bad shit that was happening, made it darker almost. Whereas in Mortal Coil, I felt like the comedy took away from the darkness. But it still definitely goes with my theory that, you know, when we're doing dark stuff in books for younger children, it's good to have a bit of humour in there and not take the dark things too seriously. But I am, tonight, when I go to bed momentarily, to be honest, even though it's not that late, I'm going to pick up Confessions and start reading this. This I expect not to have any humour in it. I just expect it to be very intense. So I'm excited for that, although I'm slightly worried about reading it at night, but I don't think it should be the kind of book that's like intense in a way that makes me feel like there's a murderer lurking around my house. So I guess we'll see. The other thing that I did read is I read When I Say Red by, who's it by again? Britta some kind of activist, Britta Teckentrup. So I really liked this book. It had some really lovely art. Like, look, just now I've opened up with the girl on this panther. And I think it does a really good job of, like, describing what it feels like to be angry. So I could imagine reading this as a kid and being like, yeah, that's what being angry feels like. But there is a section in here where it gets into how, like, anger can be really powerful. And, like, as the author's an activist, I can see where that message is coming from. But I also feel like it's a little bit dangerous to talk about how powerful anger can be without talking about the harm that anger can do. Because I feel like if you read this as a kid and didn't get much guidance around it, that you could kind of come away with the idea that it's always good to act out on your anger. And especially as a kid, I don't know that that is a good idea. So it's kind of weird because, I mean, of course you don't expect too much nuance in a little children's picture book about anger. But I still feel like if you're going to talk about the power of anger, you need to talk about the potential harm of anger as well. Because anger's not a simple thing, right? I did just really like reading all the descriptions of anger and really feeling it, letting myself feel it. And then at the end it kind of talks about, you know, how she's free now, her anger's gone. That part I quite liked. So, but there was only a couple of pages at the end. I kind of wanted it to be more. But I could definitely read this again. There's parts I really liked, but I think I'd feel conflicted about giving this to a kid. So, who knows? Anyway, I guess that's all for now. So, the other thing that I did make progress on is I read some more of the Atlas 6. Where did I get up to? So I've only got like 2 hours left to go. I can definitely finish that tonight. Again, like in every generation, I have been feeling more positive about it in this kind of last, like, between halfway to 3/4. Oh my god, I can't do maths today. It's too late for that. My brain's not on today. So kind of from about halfway to 3/4 of the way through, I started enjoying it. I do feel like if I listen to it too much, it gets a bit much and I start being like, wow, you guys are really like overblowing everything. And it's just like making everything really dramatic, which also could be the audiobook though, because the audiobook narration style, and I find this a lot in like younger, like YA audiobooks, even though I'm not sure the exact target market of this, but anyway, I feel like the audiobook narrators are sometimes a little bit overdramatic, and I'm like, just calm down, let me just read it. And I almost feel like I would have enjoyed this more physically. As well, one of the narrators, the one for the character Callum, who you're not supposed to like, he has a really deep voice. And when I was trying to listen to it when I was out by traffic or when I was washing up my hair dye in the shower, I really struggled to hear him because his voice was just too low. Anyway, sometimes audiobooks make things better, but in this case I think maybe not. It's hard to know because to really test this kind of thing, you need to read it twice, but not having read it the time before in the other format. But I do think it has gotten a little bit darker. There's a few mysteries going on, a few connections where characters showed up where I wasn't expecting them to show up. The only weird thing is there's kind of this idea that they have to select one of the 6 to die and the others will get into the society. But they kind of just all decided that they were going to go and kill this person. And I was like, but isn't there like a proper procedure for like selecting and killing this person? You don't just randomly say, oh, well, we'll kill them tomorrow, shall we? Okay, sure, you do it. It seemed a bit weird to me. But anyway, of course it didn't go to plan. So, 2 more hours of that. I'm interested to see what's going to happen and whether we'll learn some of the mysteries. This is again going to be a series, so it's possible we won't learn all the secrets in this book, but I hope we'll learn enough for me to be satisfied. And I've only got 2 hours to go, so I should definitely be able to finish that as well by the next time I talk to you. So I'll tell you more about this and more about this in a second. Hello, so I wanted to update you briefly because I did start this last night. I only read 1 chapter, but that first chapter was 50 pages. And like, it was what I expected, but also not what I expected. It's kind of a strange format in that it's this teacher talking to her class, but there's no real like dialogue or description. It's just exactly verbatim the words the teacher's saying, but you can tell that it's what she's saying because she'll stop every now and then and like address the class or like react to something that they're doing or something that they've said, but you don't get to hear what it is that they've said. You know, she'll just answer their question or something like that. So it's kind of a strange format. And as well, it feels like she's kind of meandering all over the place. So she's talking about, you know, how she's retired and why she got into teaching and about her husband and about like these other children that have done really awful things in the past and how the justice system can't really punish really young children. And then she gets into the fact that her daughter died and that some of the kids in the class are responsible. I guess there's a lot in there about this idea of whether young children should or should not be punished for the things they do, especially when they do really terrible things. But I think what was most interesting about the chapter for me is that, like I said, she talks about a lot of random things, but kind of all the random things came together to actually mean something when she got to the end of her speech. And definitely, like, what she did was pretty dark. It wasn't what I expected. But it's definitely interesting and something to think about. I did look at the next chapter and I noticed that it's not from the teacher's perspective. It seems it was going to be from one of the students' perspectives. I'm not sure if it's the student actually talking to her or writing her a letter or what. I don't know. But I'll probably read this again tonight because I really do want to find out what's happening or what else horrible stuff is going to happen. Because kind of I thought the whole book was going to be the stuff that happens in the first chapter. So that's exciting. The other thing I did do while I did a bunch of housework today. I'm so very proud of myself. Even though my house doesn't seem that much tidier. But honestly, I did. I framed my puzzle. That's my biggest achievement for the day. I've been putting that off for so long and I haven't been able to use my dining table because it's had this puzzle on it. Anyway, while I was doing all of that, I was listening to the next Skulduggery Pleasant book. So Deathbringer, it's called Deathbringer. What I found interesting about these books is that I always feel very engaged at the beginning of the story, and also I think the things that happen at the end of the story are often interesting, except the action scenes. I'm not a fan of action scenes just in general, and this series does tend to have a fair amount of action, so I'm not a fan of that. But like, it's also the middle of the book. I do feel like it goes on and on a bit sometimes, and I really want to just get to the point a bit more quickly. And I also note the first books in this series were quite short, like the audiobooks were 5 or 6 hours, whereas these later books are more like 14 hours. And I kind of suspect that they could have been cut down to 5 or 6 hours and still been the same length as the first books. And I think a lot of the convoluted stuff in the plot isn't necessarily necessary. But I feel like a true Skulduggery Pleasant fan would probably disagree with me, because they're probably there for all the different bad guys and all the convoluted stuff, whereas I just want the main plot and the humor. And like, I like it when the dark stuff does happen as well, like some of the twisted stuff, which definitely there is some of it going on. So I'll be really interested to see actually, like, some of the things that have been building for a long time through this series are starting to come to fruition. So I'm interested to see how that's all going to play out, because it could go in a few different directions. Anyway, I still have a video to edit, so I better go and do that, but I'll check in with you guys momentarily. Hello, I look tired. I am tired. My neck's all red, and I don't know, but honestly, I've been putting off updating you guys, so here I am to do an update. Yesterday, I spent most of the day watching Ellie from her back quarters live show. She was doing a 24-hour reading sprints thing, and I tried to use it as like a mix between reading sprints and productivity sprints. And I felt like I was fairly productive, but also I never got around to updating you, even though I meant to the whole day. So how productive was that really? Then this morning, I was going to update you again before I went to my infusion, but the traffic. My infusion appointment was at 9 o'clock, and the traffic was so bad that it's like a 5-minute drive, but it took me like 25 minutes to get there. It's like the hospital is on the same road that I live on, and it took 25 minutes to drive to the other end of the road. So I was late, and then the new hospital that I'm going to has different procedures than the other one. When I went to the door, they're like, have you got your rat result? I was like, no, because at the other hospital they do the rat test when you get there, but this one they're like, oh, you should have done a rat test already. So then I had to get a rat test, then I was even more behind, but at least I know I haven't got COVID, so that's good. The other thing that happened at the hospital is so like I get this infusion. It's just a regular thing to keep my Crohn's under control. Very helpful, keeps me alive. I like it. But they couldn't find my veins, so they ended up going in my hand, which I hate. And then after I left the hospital, they put a little plaster on it, and I'm walking over to the car park, and my hand suddenly feels wet, and it's because it started bleeding and it's like overflowed the plaster they've put on. And like when I take off the plaster, it's all coming out of like this tiny hole, and I'm pretty sure like it's already coming up as a big bruise, and it's actually kind of painful. So that's why I don't like it when it's in my hand. And also I just think my blood doesn't like, what's the word? Coagulate? Set very quickly anyway. So now I'm gonna have a massive bruise on my hand. Cool. But anyway, this is meant to be a reading vlog, so I'll tell you about some reading. I did actually manage to read a bit, as I said yesterday during the reading sprints, but also during my infusion. The hospital that I'm going to now has a special infusion room, and it's so fancy. At one point I had 3 nurses looking after me. I felt very cared for. And so I think I was able to focus better as well, which was nice. Also, if you can hear the storm outside, it's awful, awful weather. I'm pretty much spending all my time in this room at the moment because it's the easiest one to heat, because it's freezing and stormy and I don't want to go outside, but I really need to go and get some exercise because I'm sure that's part of why I'm feeling tired all the time. Anyway, I read this one, Half Past Peculiar. To be honest, kind of terrible, even for a kid. Like, I just think it wasn't until well past halfway that the main point to the story was introduced, and then really by the time we got to the end, all it had really done is set up this other world that they could go to through this clock, and then now they're stuck in this other world, but like it's not really, like nothing happened, and the characters were very unclear. Like the characterization, it kept telling you the characters were a certain way and then they'd act in a completely different way. And the one thing I did like though, so it's kind of got mixed in, like it's got normal, I'm so bad at showing things. It's got normal chapters, and then it's also got like these comic bits mixed in. To be honest, I would have preferred if the whole thing was just comics, because I don't think the writing was very good for the book bits. But I did kind of like the comic-y bits, so I think there should be more comics. And I don't know, there's another book in this series, like actually wrapping up the story, but to be honest, no interest in continuing that. And like, the darkest part here is that the parents are off like traveling the world doing crazy science stuff, and they've just left their 2 kids at home with no one even looking out for them. That's some dark shit there, really. So then the other one I picked up was this other one that I got in this other middle grade one. In some ways similar, like this one has a brother and sister, and one is much more like follow the rules, and the other one's kind of more gets into trouble, and it's the girl that gets into trouble, the boy that follows the rules. This one, also the boy follows the rules, the girl is a little bit all over the place, likes to get in trouble. This one, the characterization, so much better. But I haven't actually read that much of this one, like 50 pages. But I am liking the story. Basically, their father runs this like antique shop or some kind of shop. I think it was a watch shop, and then he was trying to make more money because they're very low on money. So he turned it into an antique shop. Oh, and their mothers died, and basically the business is failing. But this guy turns up and says, if you come to my new fancy house that I've bought and fix this giant clock that like somehow generates the power for the house, then I'll pay you like crazy amounts of money. And the only thing is that you have to like go there straight away and stay there for a couple of weeks while you fix it. So they've basically gone to this house and they found this giant clock. Was there a picture? There's a few pictures through here, but maybe it's mostly just the chapter headings. Is headings the right word when it's a whole page? Anyway, mainly just these bits. But the clock has like these little slots for like different animals, but there's also these other animal statues where the dog's ear has fallen out and someone's put it in the cat's mouth, although that's what they think, but I think that these animals come to life. That's what I'm expecting. So I'm going to continue this one. I'm liking this one a lot more. It is kind of like, it's got that dark and mysterious vibe because they've turned up to this house and it's kind of haunted and they don't know what's going on there. It seems like there was one part where the house kind of seemed like it threw a brick at the owner, like maybe the house is alive, which I'm keen for that. So I'm going to continue this one maybe tonight. The other thing that I have been reading is Confessions. This one, how close am I to the end? Oh, here's my proof that I'm COVID negative. Anyway, I am on page 204 and it's only 225 pages long. So I've got like 20 pages to go. It's kind of like each chapter is from a different character's perspective. The first one was that teacher giving her speech. The second chapter was from this other student who was in the class who's kind of giving another perspective on things. Then the third chapter, I thought it was going to be from the sister of one of these murderous boys, but it actually turned out to be the sister finding the diary of the mother, because actually in that second chapter there was another like what the fuck moment. Like the ending of the first chapter is like what the fuck, the ending of the second chapter, what the fuck. Then though, the next 2 chapters are really just giving you more perspectives of what's happened, and I don't know how I feel about them because it's kind of giving you insight into these murderous boys and like why they did the thing they did. But I just like, you can kind of understand it, but at the same time I'm like, no, but like no, that's a really stupid thing to do. But there's definitely a lot of thinking in here around the impacts of different things on youth and how that leads them to potentially do unwise things, and then what you should even do about that after that or before that. The mother's chapter was quite interesting. And right now it is a chapter from another one of the boys, and his perspective is the one I'm struggling with the most because, wow, he is so broken. But I'm going to finish this and then I'll let you know kind of final thoughts. But I have enjoyed it. I feel like it's a bit hard because it's all over the place. Definitely, I think the first 2 chapters were my favorites. And then the other ones I'm just really struggling with the characters, these children's behavior. I can't relate to it at all. I don't know why you do those things. But I guess that's the point of the story, is that it's this really dark stuff that you wouldn't expect to happen. Anyway, every time I put my hand down it hurts because of the stupid bruise, so that's annoying. I don't know what else I'm meant to be doing tonight. It's already 6 o'clock and I'm meant to be getting up early for this random meetup thing that I signed up for, but I've been getting up late, so I'm really mad at myself for signing up for that and having to get up early. So I guess I'll do a few things, finish reading this, make some more progress on this, And then hopefully tomorrow we'll be less tired. Even though I'm waking up early, so that seems unlikely. But maybe I'll be less tired and we'll make some more progress on things and I will catch you up too. Good morning. So, I skipped a day. Yesterday was one of those not feeling human kind of days, but today I think I'm back to feeling human. Also, yesterday, while I was not feeling human, I did go for a walk, but I think that actually, like, it kind of made me feel better and worse at the same time. Anyway, while I was going for the walk, I did manage to finish Deathbringer, which I don't know that I've talked that much about. So this is the 6th book in the Skulduggery Pleasant series. I feel like I'm very confused about that series. There's parts that I really like, and I do like the writing style, but I just feel like overall, like, I don't think I actually like most of the characters, and there's so much going on that I don't care about. I kind of wish that it was more just focused on the main character Stephanie's story, because every time we get these other side characters and side plots that I don't care about, I get bored. But at the same time, Stephanie annoys me quite a lot sometimes too. And it's like all this quite extreme stuff is happening in the plot, but she never really reacts very much to it. She's very like pragmatic and just moves ahead, which is, I guess, admirable, but also kind of annoying. But also means like you don't get the emotions of the story. I did like what happened with the necromancers in this story. So necromancers kind of dark. And there were also a few reveals in here to do with the necromancy, which were quite interesting. Some of the main characters had some secrets. So maybe I like this one better than the last one. But I kind of feel like this series just isn't for me, which I shouldn't be surprised about. You know, I'm the wrong generation after all. Anyway, after that though, I picked up Watch Hallow, which I'm also the wrong generation for, but I loved this. This is actually the first book in a series. I don't know, there's another book, so I guess there's at least 2 books. I don't know if there'll be more. But we've got this family who's gone to this house to try and fix this magical clock. Of course, they don't know it's magical, but they find out. And there's these magical clockwork animals. It talks about on the back that there's clockwork animals. And I love the clockwork animals. And like the stuff the family does to try and save these animals was just really lovely. But also, like, there's this dark element where there's this spooky wood that's kind of like encroaching on this house. And the house itself is kind of alive. And there's this boy like haunting out in the forest. And this family portrait inside the house where the baby has turned into like a black smudge. And any pictures of this boy are like a black smudge. So I really liked it. The only thing in my notes, I did make a few notes about things at the beginning I didn't particularly like. So there was one note about how the main boy had gone to counseling and it didn't really help. And I don't know, maybe I'm being very picky, but like I feel like in younger books I don't like it to have like an anti-counseling message. And there was also like a fat phobic bit where the bad bully is referred to as like a fat, his name, like they call him Fat Theo, and I'm like, you don't need to make the bad guys fat all the time. I think there was something else too. I don't know why I write my notes and then I don't bring them out when I'm going to talk to you, but I'm not that organized. A few tiny bits I didn't like, but also I really liked like the bullying, had a social media aspect. So I think for the generation, very relevant, but also just like a lovely magical story of family and magical animals. So I love this one. Then the last book that I want to read for this vlog is After Dark by Murakami. So I started this and Murakami, he's so hard. I was really enjoying the writing style. We basically start we're in Denny's and we're watching this girl. So it's kind of described in a very like film-like way, like you're watching a film and it's describing the film almost. So we start out, there's this girl in Denny's reading a book and this guy turns up and is like, hey, I knew your sister. Remember that time we went on a double date, blah, blah, blah. He talks a lot. And then later this other woman turns up and says to her, hey, this guy told me you can speak Chinese. I've got this Chinese girl who's in a bit of trouble. Can you come and like help translate? And she goes off to help with that. I haven't really got much further than that so far. Although what I will say, Murakami, it has an element where he's included periods in the plot again. Like just a general piece of advice for male writers. Don't include periods in your plot. Like I know maybe you're trying to be realistic or whatever, but like don't, because you don't understand them. And Murakami had periods as a significant part of the plot in Kafka on the Shore. And I'm trying to remember now actually whether the Wind Up Bird Chronicle had it too. If it did, I ignored it in that one, but I didn't appreciate it in Kafka on the Shore. And in this, I'm also like, yeah, nah, don't, no. And I feel like it's going to be a bigger part of the plot because there was some comment one of the characters made about how women always seem to get their periods when they're in this hotel. I'm just like, why would you want to make this part of the plot? Like, the writing is so beautiful and the kind of the setup, the atmosphere is really cool. And then he throws in this random period shit. There's like one line, let me try and find it, where the woman says, well, she couldn't help it. When it starts, it starts. Bang. I mean, sometimes, not always. And I just can't imagine a woman ever saying, when it starts, bang. Bang? Really? Yeah, no. I'm not a fan of that part. So I'm really hoping that the period stuff won't be too much of the book, because if it is, I'm going to hate it. But the rest of it is really interesting. We've also got this girl who was reading the book. Her older sister is in a room where this TV randomly turned on by itself. And also each chapter is like named by the time. In this edition, there's like a little clock at the beginning telling you the time because it's after dark, the middle of the night. Anyway, I'll finish this one off and then we'll try and look at all these books and come up with some kind of conclusion, I guess. I'm trying to get a bunch of stuff done today, so finishing this is going to be on my list. Good morning. So, I finished off After Dark quite late last night. After Dark, if you will. I actually wish this book was fatter, so I think it would be really cool to read this book like overnight, kind of between the hours that the book is set, because it's pretty much all just over one night. And like our main character, it starts with her in Denny's reading this really fat book, and she has this book with her the whole time. So if this was a big fat book, you could read it and pretend you were kind of going through the same journey that she is. That said, not much really happens. It's more about, I guess, this main character and maybe the others kind of trying to figure out what they want to do in life, which is very similar themes to some of his other books. But I kept waiting for like the weird parts to kind of all come together, but it doesn't really. Like, you can definitely interpret things in a bunch of ways, and I'm sure some people would enjoy kind of like guessing their own ending or like having their own ideas about what was going on. But I just felt like, because this is only 200 pages, I got to the end and I wasn't happy with that being the end. So that's another reason why I wish this was a thicker book, because I feel like I really enjoyed the setup, except for the period stuff. And you know what? There was no further mention of periods after that first part. So do you think that even needed to be in there, Murakami? I think you'll find it didn't need to be in there. It could totally have been cut out, and I would have loved this, probably, without that mention. But that like made me go, wait, what am I reading? I mean, there's definitely some other bits which are darker. Not that periods are dark, although the way Haruki Murakami writes them, they are. But there's a few dark bits, but at the same time, because it never really explains anything, it ends up that those bits don't even mean anything. And other than those bits, it's pretty much just this girl helping out with a prostitute that's been beaten up, and then meeting a guy, having a nap, and then going back to see her sister. Like, that's all that happens at a high level. So I guess I think I'm giving this 3 stars. I didn't mind it. I thought it was a nice read, but I just didn't feel like it meant much in the end. So that's disappointing. But now I'm looking at all the books that I read for this video. So these ones and the audiobooks I read were 2 Skulduggery Pleasant ones and the Atlas 6. So my 2 favorites were definitely these ones. This is the Gen X one, so I guess it makes sense that I would like this since I am Gen X. I think this was like the darkest and twistiest one, and really, I probably shouldn't be reading dark books across a lot of generations because I want really dark and twisty books, and I don't think you can really do proper dark and twisty for a younger audience like middle grade books. I think, like, I want really dark and twisty. So if you have any recommendations for really dark and twisty books down below, then let me know your recommendations. I also know it's kind of hard to recommend these kind of books because everybody has different triggers and like different lines. So with dark and twisty books, you kind of want it to go right up to your lines and your boundaries of comfortableness, but not beyond it, because then you'll be like, wow, it went too far. But you want it to go far enough that it kind of like freaks you out. And I also want it to be twisty so that it surprises you. This definitely went up to the line, didn't go over it, but maybe that's because my line is pretty far. on most things. And it definitely had that twistiness. Some unexpected things happened. This one is definitely my favorite. I also really liked Watch Hallow. I think though I like this more for the fantastical, what's the word? Like really loveliness of the whole story. Even though there is a darker element, I felt like you always knew that that darker element was going to be overcome. Whereas in a lot of older books, that's not always true. Often the darker element wins out because it's more realistic, unfortunately. This one though, lovely. I think as well, I don't really know how to pick out dark books for children, because when I went to the library I pretty much just picked out some that looked kind of spooky-ish, and that's not really what I mean when I say dark books. I don't really mean spooky, but when you just look at covers you can't really tell. So I guess as well, do you have any good recommendations for properly dark like children's books? I would be interested. Because even though I didn't like this one, I think that was just because that's poorly written. But I did think Gen Z books, not so bad. If we look at my millennial books though, this one, I think the problem was with this. My main problem with this is everything I bring with me from the Buffy world and my expectations of it. But like the actual story itself, if you can take all the context away from it, which you can't because it's part of the Buffy world, but if you could, this was an okay story. I think as well though, I'm just so far out of the YA age range at the moment that this is not me. In fact, YA is possibly Gen Z these days. I really should have researched this properly. I did look it up and then I promptly forgot because, to be honest, I think generations are kind of rubbish. This one was my boomer book, so boomers, not great with periods. Not a surprise. But other than that, I did really like this. I'm just so disappointed about the end. Blah. Maybe that's boomer life. Like, great ideas, poor execution. And this one as well, like, I really enjoyed this, but whenever I read children's books, and it was true with these two as well, like, I just find when I read children's books, I can't help but think, what lessons is this teaching children? And if I don't like those lessons, I'm like not happy with the book, even if it's a good story and I would have enjoyed it as a kid. I'm like, yeah, but do you really want to be telling kids that? So this I thought was a really cool book to read, but like I feel like you could only give it to a child if you were gonna then sit down and have a big conversation with them about anger and the potential harm you can do to yourself and others if you just like let it out in unhealthy ways. Hello, sorry, editing me here, because apparently, despite talking for a very long time about a lot of books, I never gave you my final thoughts of the Atlas 6, and I feel like I'll insert them here. The ending was honestly kind of weird because it kind of went away from the core main group of characters and went off into this other section and gave you a whole bunch of other information, which I feel like would have been better if you'd somehow gotten it in little bits throughout the story rather than just randomly at the end being like, oh, and by the way, here's some new information that's completely different. It definitely does make me interested to find out what's going to happen next. And I feel just in general, my thoughts about this book is that there's a lot of potential. I like the things that are set up in this book, but I also just feel like I was a little bit disappointed that we didn't get enough depth in this book and that there wasn't more twists and turns between the different things the characters were doing. So I'm hopeful for the next book in the series, but I'm a little bit scared that it's going to be the same situation as it was with House of Earth and Blood, where I loved it, and then House of Sky and Breath was not what I wanted. But I guess we'll remain hopeful. I definitely would say I don't think I am the right demographic, the right generation for the Atlas 6. So I can see why people of a younger generation have been really loving it. Maybe if I read it when I was younger, I would also really have loved it. But at the moment, it's not quite giving me what I wanted. But maybe the sequel will. Anyway, back to Other Penny to wrap things up. And I just filmed for way too long, so I'll have to try and cut some of that out, because I know this vlog is already way too long. I think the summary of this, though, is that I don't know how to find good dark and twisty books. So I will have to do some research. Hopefully you'll give me some recommendations, and then maybe at some point later we'll try again with reading a bunch of dark and twisty books, like properly adult. Let's not worry about children. Let's just get into the darkness, you know? Anyway, let me know if you've read any of the books that I talked about in this video, because if you have, I'd love to talk with you about those in the comments as well. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I